Cops and other law enforcement officers, tell us about cases where you thought something supernatural or paranormal was going on. I am a former emergency worker, a firefighter. One night, a call came to check the health status of a person who called 911, who, however, did not answer the operator. We arrived at the address. The house was kind of strange, and a little old lady met and greeted us on the threshold. We asked her if she knew who had called 911, but she replied that she had been living alone since her husband died. We had barely returned to the station when we received another call, still at the same address. We drove back, talked to the old lady again, and left again. As soon as we get back to the station, there's the same call again, the same address, and no answer. We go there again, thinking that the old lady is a little overwrought, but this time, when we arrived at the door, the old lady was no longer on the threshold. We rang the doorbell, but there was no answer. It turned out that the door was unlocked. We looked inside and saw Grandma lying on the floor and not breathing. We immediately performed first aid and took her to the hospital. She was in stable condition. When she woke up in the ambulance, she kept saying that she hadn't called us and that we had arrived almost immediately after she had lost consciousness. It's a 15-minute drive from the police station to her house. Before taking her to the hospital, she asked me and another emergency worker if we could bring knitting needles and some clothes to her hospital. I said I would take her things because I had a friend in the area who we were going to meet anyway. Anyway, I'm picking up a friend, and we're going to Grandma's house. I ran into the house to pick up a bag of things and knitting needles, and at that time, my friend stayed in the car. And as soon as I left the house, I swear, I felt someone's hand on my back and heard a voice saying thank you. When I got back in the car, my friend asked why this grandmother's husband couldn't take her things to the hospital himself. I said that her husband was dead, to which my friend replied, "And then who was that old man in the window who smiled and waved at me?" At first, I refused to believe in anything supernatural, so I called the police and asked them to inspect the house. I thought someone had broken into her place. They didn't find anything unusual, and there was no one inside. Later, my friend and I went to visit my grandmother. He began to describe the old man who was standing in the window, but the old woman, without giving him time to continue, immediately began to sob and said, "This is my Harold. I'm literally crying through fear right now." It's easy to deny ghost stories until something like this happens to you personally. I'm an emergency worker, and one day we were called to a local mall. We arrived, and it turned out that an 8-year-old girl had breathing problems. It was late at night, and her mother, aunt, and cousin had just been caught stealing. We assumed that the breathing problems were caused by stress. As soon as we got into the car, the girl looked into the eyes of my partner and me and said that the place she lives in is bad. She said she lives surrounded by demons, and I swear by my ass, as soon as she said about demons, in a matter of seconds, her pulse dropped from 90 to 45 beats per minute. My partner and I exchanged glances and immediately started trying to defuse the situation. As a result, the girl came to her senses. I will never forget this incident. Changed. As soon as we stabilized her condition, of course, we immediately reported everything to the police. It's not my story, but when I read it, I got pretty fucked up. The old lady called 911 and asked to send some police officers to her house because she saw a strange figure hiding in her backyard. She lived alone, and that night she felt in danger when she saw someone's silhouette in the window. When the police arrived, the door was unlocked. They entered the house, saw Grandma sitting facing the window, and went to check the backyard. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was missing. There was a high fence around the house, which made it almost impossible for anyone to enter the territory. However, the cops found footprints inside the house. It is likely that she left the door unlocked and saw someone not on the street through the window, but in his reflection inside the house, behind her. I was in Afghanistan. I was on guard duty. Suddenly, I turned towards the farmer's field and saw a huge panther there. This thing seemed to be 10 meters long. My heart started pounding like crazy. I was about to tell my people on the walkie-talkie when I suddenly realized that I needed to turn off the depth perception on night vision goggles. After that, I immediately saw an ordinary cat, about 40 centimeters or so, who was sitting on the ledge of the guardhouse. Anyway, I scared the shit out of a Marine once. Yeah, geez. It was a fun day and probably the most intense moment of my life. Well, maybe. Except when I dropped a ball of fur into his coffee mug, or when I dropped grenades off the table. Yeah, that was fun too. I'm a paramedic firefighter. One late summer night, we went on a call to the countryside. My partner and I were driving along a winding 2-lane highway in the middle of complete unknown. No lighting except for the headlights and the moon. We are approaching a sharp turn to the right, when suddenly I see a man moving in the tall grass. He moves very fast and smoothly, as if he were riding a bicycle. His arms and torso do not jump or move up and down, as when running. Anyway, I was a little stuck and confused when I saw a guy riding a bike through the grass in the middle of the night. But come on. Then he approaches the tree and stops. At about this moment, we drive past him. I look out the window and see him standing next to a tree without a bike or anything else. He just stands there and looks at the truck passing by. My hair stood on end. As we continue driving, I decide to ask my partner if he's seen the guy. His answer, "Bro," and I thought I was crazy. This case is very difficult to explain, and yes, it was probably just a coincidence. But I still never tell my colleagues about it. I worked as a homicide investigator for a while. We've been dealing with all the suspected suicides, investigating them to make sure it's not murder. We usually determined the motive for suicide and found a note or other sign that the person had committed suicide. For example, one guy stupidly glued a note to his chest with the inscription, "Well, bitch, are you happy now?" and did everything so that his wife would be the first to find him after he hanged himself. But sometimes there are cases when all the evidence points to the fact that a person committed suicide, but there is no note or discernible reason why this person could commit suicide. Such people have good health, decent jobs, and at first glance, a happy family life. But who knows what really happens in humans? And now I'll tell you about the very case that still makes me shudder. In my career, there have been about 10 suicides in which the motive was not obvious. In the last 3 such cases, I found the same thing at the crime scene. It was a small decorative wicker lighthouse that was found in all places. The same lighthouse with the same design, it was painted white and blue. The first time he got into my head was because I was standing by the bed where the body was. But 2 weeks later, I saw the same fucking beacon on another suicide. And I even told the patrol officer about this coincidence. A few months later, I went to investigate another suicide and saw the same wicker lighthouse. It clicked to me then that these were always unexplained suicides. I went back to the station and started going through all the photos from the scenes of each suicide I was working on. In 2 of them, I saw in the photo what could be this wicker lighthouse, but the angle of the photo was unfortunate, and there were too many different junk around to be sure, for sure. 'Cause guys, I thought it was pretty damn creepy, but after a couple of months I transferred and stopped thinking about it. Changed. Are you asking if it was a serial killer? You know, I doubt it very much. These were all obvious suicides, most of which had no adequate alternative explanation. We've always worked on every suicide as if it were murder. Presumably, suicide is almost always suicide, but we always double-check anyway. Besides, even though there are actually more serial killers than you might think, they rarely leave business cards or anything like that, as they usually show in movies. As a rule, this is some kind of crazy person with a special style. I really think it was just a weird coincidence, but it was fucking creepy anyway. Buddy, you're going to wake up at this rate one night and see this decorative wicker lighthouse on your bedside table. I would have been drunk right away. You should find that fucking lighthouse and burn it down. It never occurred to me that it was the same lighthouse. I thought it was some kind of seasonal jewelry that was sold in a pottery shop. I worked in the emergency room for a while. One day they called us and said that some guy was riding a bike without a helmet at a wild speed and got into the car. We arrived at the place immediately. Despite the fact that it was a Saturday afternoon and it happened in the center of the suburb, no one even came up to check on the poor guy. Seriously, the streets were completely empty. Usually in such cases, a crowd of onlookers gathers around, but not this time. In general, the victim's skull was severely fractured, and he showed no signs of life. I've never seen a more serious head injury in my life. According to our preliminary assessment of his condition, he suffered a serious skull fracture, concussion, and heavy bleeding. He also had some teeth missing and numerous abrasions from driving on the asphalt. But fortunately, not all of his skin was torn off. To give you an idea, it looked so bad that most people wouldn't have survived it. and if anyone had survived, they would have been a vegetable for the rest of their lives. Normally, we would have dragged him from the road to the sidewalk, but when a person has a head or neck injury, it is extremely dangerous to drag him. My partner, who was more experienced and trained me since I was still kind of new, went to check his pulse while I started pulling out our equipment. He sat down, held his finger on the pulse for a while, and then got up and just wanted to say something, when suddenly this guy fucking jumped up. But he didn't even use his hands to get up. He just fucking jumped up on his feet. My partner and I were scared shitless. The guy looked at us, smiled, and tried to lift the bike. We tried to stop him, but given his condition, we didn't want to push with him. He got away from us and stupidly ran off into the woods, leaving his bike. My partner was even more stunned than I was. He stood with his mouth open and watched where that guy was going. Then he turned to me and muttered, "Dude, he didn't have a fucking pulse." I asked if he was sure about this, and he swore with everything he had that the biker was clinically dead. We asked for help from the authorities. They sent a search and rescue team to the forest. I do not know if they found him or not, because we usually do not receive any information about patients after they get to the doctors. My best guess for what happened is that a man with a clouded mind decided to go to his beloved's house. People tend to bleed profusely from head injuries, so I'm guessing the guy left a long red trail of blood that the cops were able to track him down. Subscribe to our channel and watch our other videos. Write in the comments, which story do you remember the most?